Pennsylvania, hey, we're neighbors. Yeah. That's it? Just one person from out of state? North Carolina, great. Love North Carolina. I'm not from Florida. Did I say that right? Is that how they say it here in Florida? Florida? All right. Let me know when I can get started. All right. Well, welcome to the Exploit Kit presentation. My name is Dave Vargas. I just wanted to know, so you can know a little bit about me. I've been a consultant for over 20 years. I'm also a professor of cybersecurity and networking at several colleges and universities in the Washington, D.C. area where I'm from. I'm actually from Vienna, Virginia. My training, I actually got started in security and Navy cryptography. Anybody here former Navy or done cryptography? Yay. Where? Nuclear power, too smart for me, yeah? Subs? Okay. Well, I did Crippy, and was originally attached to the National Security Agency. Done a lot of security stuff, including my favorite probably was doing Army counterintelligence training, which was really cool. Went down to San Antonio and learned how to follow people. From a personal perspective, I got brownie points for that first bullet. I'm married to a super hot, sexy wife from Guatemala. Okay, so that's good brownie points on that one. I have 4 children and 1 cat, and I'm a member of an SDA church in Virginia. All right, so my goal for this presentation is really to introduce you on what exploit kits are. We're going to talk about the fact that we've seen somewhat of a decrease in exploit activity because of some recent events, current events, but I do expect us to see an upsurge again in this presentation. And by the way, I'm not going to read every bullet. I hope that's okay with you, right? If you want the presentation, I'll give you my email, I'll send it to you, but I'm just going to cover the highlight of each slide, okay? So this is going to be the agenda. We'll explain what EKs are, how they work, and we'll give you go over an example EK infection chain with one called RIG, which is still out there, how it distributes ransomware called Locky, and what are some of the best practices for protecting against EKs, conclusions, also at the end. But if you have questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation. If you want to wait till the end, that's fine too. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, Crimeware-as-a-Service, right? And when we've seen as a service, do you necessarily think about crime as a service? Does that come to mind? What comes to mind? What technology? Software, yeah, cloud stuff, right? Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. What's the other one? Infrastructure as a service? Platform as a service, right. So, I know I have several customers who are on cloud, and one of the reasons they're on cloud is basically it just makes certain things very easy. For example, I've had customers who have outsourced their Exchange to the cloud via Office 365 or other solutions. And guess what? It works really well for them. And I particularly appreciate it because I don't know in your environment, if email is 2 minutes delayed, it's an emergency for the customers, okay? So I'm very happy to kind of let them outsource that. But what this has led to essentially is, and from a crimeware perspective, has led to the automation of crimeware, okay? And we call that a Crimeware-as-a-Service. And that's the key word is automation. So when you look at Crimeware-as-a-Service, you're going to see it's subdivided into many different types. Some of these you may have heard of. Probably the most famous one today is probably Ransomware-as-a-Service. Has anyone here been hit by ransomware in their organizations? Yeah. Did you recover? Okay. Yeah. It
was an elderly person.
So it was an individual. Did they recover? Probably not.
I got him back.
You got him back. Oh, right. That's really unusual.
I had to boot him up in a different place.
Okay. Oh, good for you. Good for you. So, but really what they all have in common, it has to do with automation to make it easy so that someone who's not very skilled can deal with ransomware, okay, or any other kind of a type of malware. So Ransomware-as-a-Service, right, it's a cybercrime offering because I don't think I know of any application for ransomware other than to extort money from the target organization, okay? And the key is it can be deployed by anyone with very little skill, right? We used to call them script kiddies, right? What do we call them today? We call them skids, right? Same thing. And one thing that makes them attractive is that they're based on a typical affiliate model, which means it's a percentage kind of situation, okay? You distribute this, and I'll take a certain percentage, but definitely you'll get the bulk of the return for the investment that you're making. And so you'll see that some ransomware authors get a small cut of the funds. It can be anywhere from 5 to 30%, okay? While it's going to go to the distributor of the malware in ransomware. So that's a really attractive model, okay? Also, it's going to use Tor and Bitcoin. Anybody use Tor On Tor, right? Yeah, I'm a big Tor fan. So essentially, a lot of these sites could be on Tor hidden services. Anonymous, I don't know. There's been inroads made by law enforcement, right? De-anonymizing some Tor hidden services. I don't know if you're familiar with what FBI is doing. They call it the network investigative techniques, right? One of those famous examples just happened with the Playpen case, where they took over a child porn site and maintained it for a week. And it was a problem because that meant that they were distributing child porn for a week. So anybody who knows anything about forensics knows what the problem is with that one there, and a lot of the cases got thrown out. And Bitcoin, although there are other cryptocurrencies that used to pay for this stuff, still happens to be the dominant cryptocurrency that's being used in cybercrime. You know, it kind of has what we call a first mover status. We know it's not a scam, right? Does anybody have any Bitcoin, own Bitcoin? Yeah, right, it's not a scam. Although in the early days of Bitcoin, there was a belief that it was a scam. Now, I don't know about the cryptocurrencies that came after. There were a large percentage that were scams, but because there seems to be some stability in Bitcoin, it continues to be the cryptocurrency of choice. The only problem that bad guys have with using Bitcoin is the fluctuations in price. Does anybody know what the latest price of Bitcoin is? 11. I love that. I own Bitcoin. I think I bought them at $240 each, so that's great. But you know, I think I heard if you cash out on your Bitcoin, it's getting on the IRS's attention. I don't know if you guys know that now. Yeah, I don't know, maybe because I live in DC area and I know this, but yeah, I'm just going to try to keep it in there as much as possible. Otherwise, you may be facing an audit. So really, you know, the key for this is that, you know, I said you don't really need technical skills for these things, okay? And notice that they're attractive to cyber criminals who are in possession of botnets or have access to a large number of compromised computers also. So there's a whole kind of cybercrime industry that's revolving around ransomware right now. And can anybody tell me why ransomware? Right? Would you agree that's probably the #1 malware threat today, ransomware? Yes? Why is that? It works. Yeah, anybody who knows anything about cryptography, the math is solid. You know, ransomware authors are using symmetric encryption algorithms like AES, okay, which are strong, right? The only way we're able to defeat the ransomware authors is if they make a mistake in implementation or some kind of error. But when it comes down to the mathematics behind it, it's pretty strong. And you know what? The problem is just going to probably most likely continue to increase. Especially, says, like, I mean, how many of these ransomware authors end up in jail? Not a lot. I mean, honestly, remember the Swift attacks that happened not too long ago? The one on Bangladesh where they almost got away with $1 billion? Yeah, my wife, she does cybersecurity too. She's a senior security engineer for 3M. And let me tell you, we were thinking about going to the other side when we heard about that. It was $1 billion, okay? I don't know how many of you, one of my students said, no, I couldn't do it because you're always going to be on the run. I'll run, no problem. No problem, okay? So here's and I know it's kind of hard to see. If you get the presentation, you can see it. Here's an example that where actually there's a ransomware author trying to negotiate with a distributor to split, okay? And notice it's a 70-30 split, okay? So that kind of demonstrates the affiliate model. So what are these things called exploits? All right? Before you got to understand what an exploit kit is you got to know what an exploit is. And essentially, an exploit is code that takes advantage of vulnerability, right? All software applications have vulnerabilities. Would you agree? Right? I don't think there'll ever be in a situation where there's a software app without vulnerability. So this exploit is going to cause a program to behave unexpectedly. For example, probably the most common thing it's going to have you do is to run program, okay, to run some kind of executable that normally wouldn't be able to run on that system. But for an attacker to deliver an exploit, it can be done in one of two ways. One, physical access, right? Hack5. Anybody use the Hack5 stuff? Bash Bunny, Rubber Ducky, right? Or even just a normal keystroke logger. You know, what are the disadvantages with having physical access or doing it via physical access? Is you have to be near the system, okay? The good thing about doing it remotely is that you can be anywhere in the world. Particularly, you can be anywhere in the world that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States, which would be? What countries don't have extradition treaties with the United States? Russia? Who else? Another big one? China. I'll move to Russia or China. I don't care. All right. And then the payload. The payload is really what does the damage. Okay. So if you look at ransomware, really the payload could be the ransomware. Okay, and I'd say the large majority probably of malware we're seeing is ransomware. There are other things like keystroke loggers. I ran into a rat the other day, remote access Trojan, which really surprised me. I don't know what that was about, but I said any kind of malicious software can serve as a payload in an exploit. So what are these exploit kits? They're scripts that exploit software vulnerabilities, right? These flaws in software, and typically the goal is to distribute malware. And again, probably the number one type of malware it's distributing today is ransomware. Why? It's effective, right? They're developed and then rented or sold on darknet markets. Okay, so this is part of Tor comes in. They're usually Tor hidden services, or they could be on what we call bulletproof hosting sites. You familiar with bulletproof hosting sites? Yeah, some of you are. So these are sites typically in Eastern Europe, a lot of it in Russia, St. Petersburg, where essentially you can host whatever you want without repercussion. So if you want to have a child porn site, no problem, and you want to distribute it, put it on a bulletproof hosting site. Okay? You want to house malware, any kind of malware exploits, put it on a bulletproof hosting site. And essentially, they definitely won't honor subpoenas from the FBI. Okay, now it's going to cost you a little bit more money to host there, okay, but then you're pretty much safe. These exploit kits actually have been around since 2006, but what's really been different now is that they're easier to use. They really don't require any technical skill. And if anybody's been following this, you may be familiar with the black hole exploit kit, which is really the one that made EKs popular. So one thing about these, they come with very colorful names. It seems like everything in cybersecurity has to have some kind of funky, sexy name these days. And you know what? Essentially, EKs are not any different. So when we look at it from 2006 is where we saw the first exploit kit, very technical. We'll see there's been a kind of a steady growth. And we're going to talk about later that some of these that you see on this list are really not so active anymore. One of them is Angler. Angler used to be the top exploit kit until the cyber gang that owned it, ran it, called Lurk, were arrested. Okay? And they're actually, Russian law enforcement arrested 50 individuals associated with Lurk. And that's when it was discovered that Lurk are the people who managed Angler. Okay? So wait a minute, the Russian law enforcement arrested other Russians for cybercrime. Does that seem unusual to you? Yes? Yeah, but you know what the unwritten rule is? The Russians don't really care who you hack as long as you don't hack them. Okay? I mean, that's the rule, right? If you do cybercrime, as long as it's external to the country, particularly the West, right? No, it's true. It's particularly the West, Eastern Europe, Germany's a big target, and the United States, then it's really pretty much okay, right? And by the way, there have been increasing evidence that the reason they do this is to get back at us for losing the Cold War. Are you aware of that? Yes. Go search for this. Apparently, a lot of experts, and there was a panel about 2 weeks ago that was talking about this, is that this is their vengeance for losing the Cold War. They feel a little bit humiliated, and Putin, and his leadership, wants to get back at the West. Think about the disinformation campaign that happened during the election. Okay, that's all part of chipping away at Western society and the way that we do our government and the way that we run ourselves. And for them, whether they're hacking the DNC or the RNC or whatever they're doing, that's just as good as stealing money from someone through ransomware. Because it's little by little, as long as it's targeted toward the West and it's, harmful to the West, then they consider it okay. So a couple of characteristics you're going to see with these EKs. And you know what? A lot of them come with really nice management consoles. Okay? So that's pretty cool. So what you can do, this is actually an example of the management console for Black Hole. You'll notice if you read Russian, anybody here read Russian? Right? Okay. Yeah, I took Russian in college, and I had no idea it might have come in handy in my future career. I would have studied harder. Because, yeah, I can tell the characters are Cyrillic, so I know it's Russian, but I can't read it as much anymore. But you'll notice when you look at this console, you'll see that the analytics will show where the kit's victims came from. Notice you see the flags here? Okay, so it'll show it by country. It'll even say what operating systems the victims were running. Okay, it'll tell you how many systems were infected and how they were infected. Pretty cool, okay? Especially if you're running some kind of scam remotely. Okay, here's some other views of the black hole management console. Okay. So another thing that they do is they deliver exploits. Okay, they're going to deliver an exploit essentially with a payload, right? Because really it's the payload that's going to do damage, right? If it's not an exploit kit, it doesn't deliver a payload. They can contain many exploits. Anybody remember in the old days, the good old days of getting malware? You would go to a site, and I'll tell you right now, I use a Mac now. And guess what? I don't fear going to a lot of sites that, you know, the Windows users get infected by. I'm kind of cocky in that way, I admit it. And, but it used to be, all right, well, if that site has an exploit for Windows 10, that's okay, I'm on a Mac, no problem. Well, guess what? Now, the way the exploit kits work, and which is what make them superior to traditional malware, is that they're going to query your machine. And most likely, they're going to find an exploit for your operating system. Okay? So it's really changed the nature of the game. Now, mind you, I have to tell you, I still haven't gotten a virus on my computer. Okay? But really, it's just a matter of time. The only reason that Macs aren't targeted is really the same reason as it's always been, which is what? Yeah, it's the percentage of the market, right? I think the last time I heard what percentage of the market Windows had was 87%. Would you agree on that? Somewhere around there. By the way, I went to a dinner with some Apple people several months ago, and they knew, like, to, you know, the decimal point, what the distribution was with Apple and Windows. So another thing, they continually update their exploits, and this is really one of the marks of a good exploit kit. Okay. You know, for you to continue to make money and be the market leader in an exploit kit, you've got to have the latest exploits, okay? So as soon as, you know, that CVE comes out and there's a vulnerability, guess what? You're writing an exploit for it. Most commonly, you're not going to find exploits for 0 days. You know that, right? I mean, it could happen. Did everybody remember the hacking team breach that happened a couple of years ago? The hacking team, you know, organizations like that are in possession of 0 days. And why is that? Why do they have 0 days? That's their business, right? They're called the hacking team. I guess that means that they hack, okay? So they were in possession of some 0 days. I know they sold some of them, they used some of them, okay? But really not. Most of the exploits are really exploiting vulnerabilities that are known, well known, and that not have been patched. And I know because I support some enterprise clients that have applications that are vulnerable. And why is that? Usually it's to support some legacy application. There's something legacy out there. You know, maybe it's some kind of accounts payable system, or it's AR system, which requires they still have to have some funky old version of IE, or it's not going to work. Okay. So come with technical support, just like ransomware, right? Right? Yeah. Right. If you've never gotten ransomware, the way it works is that, you know, it's hard to buy Bitcoin, right? Us Bitcoin users, it's not intuitive on how you manage Bitcoin. There's a couple of different ways to do that. So if you need technical support, they'll provide it for you. Guess what? Some of them have chat functions. You can actually chat them. No need to call 1-800. Okay, you can actually chat with them. And they often include license agreements. Okay, so this is interesting. This is in Russian here, and this is a translation. Look, in cases of violations of the agreement and being detected, the client loses any technical support. Moreover, the binary code of your bot will be immediately sent to antivirus companies. Okay, so this is great. So they're being threatened because you know that even the cyber criminals, they don't trust each other. You do know that, right? Okay. So let's talk about some famous exploit kits, and really this one called Black Hole was probably the first popular one. Why was it popular? It had the most recent exploits. It was easy to use, but eventually the author of that, a guy named Paunch, I think he was called Paunch because he was paunchy. I'm not sure, but essentially he eventually was arrested, and this exploit kit went away in a very big way. But I just want to tell you one thing. Once this code is out in the wild, you know it can be reused, right? So it's not like, you know, he's gone and it's gone. There have been some, there's been some evidence that the exploit kit is still out there. It's just not very used in a very big way. There's one called Neutrino, and I'm talking about this because it targets Java vulnerabilities. Who here runs Java on their endpoints? Everybody? Okay, it makes it pretty effective. And then Angler, and this is one I mentioned this before in relation to the Alert cyber gang. They dominated the market for a very, very long time. And it disappeared around June 2016 when 50 members of the Alert gang were arrested. Notice their estimated income, $60 million a year. Okay, that's, huh? They lost their tech support, is that why? But I'm sorry, I'm still shocked at $60 million a year. You know that's tax-free, right? You should be reacting to that. You're not paying taxes on that. It's literally $60 million a year through ransomware, by the way. It was majority through ransomware. And if you look at this graph from F-Secure, you'll actually see this was them. And then you see around the arrest time, you'll see that it actually became almost nothing. And that's how they were able to link it to the Lurk gang. All right, so let's talk about how these EKs operate, okay? And really, you need 2 consecutive opportunities to attack device, right? First, a person visits or most likely is redirected. What does that mean? That means you go to a website, okay? You don't realize it's a victim of malvertising, right? And it's going to take you to a site that's been compromised, right? Anybody ever do like a netstat-a after going to a news website? Have you done that? If you haven't, go do it. Do a netstat-a. Go to CNN. I go to Washington Post. And you're going to see all these other URLs for sites that you never went to. It's like, and really what hackers are doing is that they're leveraging that in websites. All they need to do is compromise one site that offers, I said advertising, okay, and essentially they're on your system. And then number 2 is the vulnerability that the EK leverages is typically unpatched and undefended, okay? So in other words, there's got to be a vulnerability in place. So the most prevalent exploits are browser exploits. Can anybody guess why? Why browser exploits? Anyone? Yeah, I know you guys. You all have to get on Facebook every day, right? No, seriously. I see that in my customers. I used to go to receptionists who used to greet me and say, "Hey, Dave, how are you doing today?" Now they don't even lift their heads anymore because they're on their Facebook or social media, which I think is really interesting. Okay. Do any of your organizations have policies to block access to social media sites? Not anymore? Really? At one time they did. Okay, that's interesting. Because where I work in Washington, D.C., there are varying levels of, risk appetites to stuff like this. There are certain organizations like associations which are very lax, and then you have the government, which is actually very strict. In the government, and that varies by agency, you may not even be able to get on Google email or Yahoo email. They'll be blocked. Yes, sir?
Even with policies for people, you still have marketing departments and everything else. Business operates on social media. So you're going to have that right there.
Yeah. I would say to reduce your risk exposure, only let them have that access. Yeah, okay. So notice that if a victim is found to be vulnerable to something, the exploit, the kit's going to then download a payload onto the victim, okay? So to reduce the chances of direct detection, okay, a lot of exploit kits include code that allows them to expose only a subset of the vulnerabilities that the kit is based on. Why? To protect against signature-based detection. Does that make sense? Right? If it's signature-based detection, and we all know signature-based detection is awesome, and really it solves all our problems in cybersecurity, right? Yes? No, absolutely not. When was the last time that really signature-based detection was effective? Think about that. No, really. I'm very young, 35, right? My wife will verify that. I'm not 35, I lied. But I'll tell you, I don't remember the last time really that signature-based solutions really were effective. Now, do we have to have them? Absolutely, right? Essentially, they catch that low-hanging fruit. But I'll tell you right now, 100% of my customers who got malware had antivirus. 100%. In fact, I had one instance in one of my customers, their Exchange server got a virus. And they were using an antivirus friend. I'm not going to mention any names. I'll tell you after the break if you want to know who they were. But it was infected. And I caught it because I ran a different antivirus application on the server. I knew something was wrong other than when it was installed. And it found some malware. And when I did my research, by the way, and I remember this was the last week of August. I don't know why I remember that. But the malware was actually detected in March earlier of the year. March. Is that crazy? And it's still, in fact, I had to send samples of that malware to the antivirus company for them to add it to their signature database, okay? So it's really not very effective. So what are we moving to? Well, more like heuristic-based, analytic-based solutions. Really, that's where the future is, okay? So if you're not using that or those technologies, you should be using them. But, so do you still need antivirus? Absolutely. It's kind of like, do you still need a firewall? Yeah, firewall, really, how effective is a firewall, really? right? It's really, really not that effective, but it's not something you're going to get rid of, okay? So an successful attack allows an attacker to gain a foothold on a device, which they can use to launch a longer chain of further intrusion and mischief. Okay, and we'll talk about what that looks like. So this is an example of the process that Black Hole went to infect this system. And let's start up here. So the victim is going to visit a compromised web page. They can get to that web page intentionally on their own by typing the URL, but most likely they were redirected from another website. Like I said, usually through advertising, something was downloaded that took them to this compromised site, this malicious site. So the web page is then going to contact what we call an exploit landing page. And what's not reflected here, but I'll talk about it later, is that since then they've introduced the concept of gates, okay? There's got to be a way of determining whether that system that they're trying to install an EK on is actually not, I guess, a malware analyst or someone trying to understand the system. So they have a service called gates now that are going to verify that you are legit. But the landing page is really what does all the work, okay? You'll notice step 3, the exploit page finds what the victim is vulnerable to, and how does it find it? It queries the system. Windows 10 operating system, this version of the browser, what version of Flash Player, what version of Java. See what's going on here? It's really taking an inventory of the system to determine what exploits do I have that allow me to own that system. So if it finds vulnerabilities, then notice it's going to start sending the exploit with payload to the victim. And there could be more than one. Okay, because once again, the difference between exploit kits and traditional malware, in traditional malware, there was one. You go to that site, okay, and there I was with my Mac knowing that they had malware. And by the way, I've done that with my customers. They would get unusual behavior. I said, give me the URL, and I would visit it with my Mac, okay, to verify it was okay, But yeah, it could be many. Now, if there are no vulnerabilities found, no payload is delivered, and essentially the victim system doesn't know that anything happened in the background. But typically what happens, because these things have grown so much, these EKs, it's going to find a vulnerability, you're going to be infected. Okay. So let's look at an example EK infection chain using this one exploit called RIG. And it was famous because it was used in this AfraidGate campaign. And the reason they call it AfraidGate is because the gates were all had the URL or top-level domain of afraid.org. Okay. And once again, what these gates are, these are actually computer systems that verify that it's a legit system that's worth exploiting, that it's not a malware researcher, for example. And really the goal was originally was to send ransomware, surprise, surprise. First it started with one called Cryptex, and then it ended up with Locky, okay? Now, one thing I want to mention, notice is it first used Angler, then Neutrino, then RIG. The bad guys really don't care what they're using, right? Their interest is what? Making money. Okay, so it's not unusual for them if they find that the results they're getting with one is not adequate, or if it goes down or disappears for whatever reason, then they're going to move on to something else. It's all about monetizing their work. So in this case here, look at the chain of events. An injected script in the page, they get an injected script in the page from a compromised site. They're going to get redirected, and by the way, this is a high-level view. We'll get more detail. Okay, they're going to get a redirect, which is actually going to download the RIG exploit kit. Okay. After the RIG exploit kit, it's going to download a Locky downloader, right, which is not actually the ransomware itself, but then the Locky downloader is going to be used to actually download the ransomware, and the system's going to be infected. So let's look at this. And anybody look familiar what this is? This application look familiar? Wireshark, right? Yeah. All right. So let's look at when you look at it from a Wireshark perspective, and this is a very high level. Okay. So we'll see they're going to this site called allthingsbritish.net. Anybody British? Okay, I was going to tell you, clean up your systems, because this is a mess. All right, so it's going to allthingsbritish.net. That's the site that's been compromised, right? It's going to have maybe an iframe or something that's going to redirect them someplace really bad where they can serve the exploit. So the second line here, notice this is a redirect, okay? What country is that? Romania. Does a lot of malware come from Romania? It does, okay? A lot of Eastern Europe. Okay, and notice it's getting what? JavaScript. Okay, once again, JavaScript is frequently exploited. Okay, then this is when it starts downloading, communicating with the RIG exploit kit server. Okay, and then essentially in the end, from this site called findidlist.com, it's going to download Locky. So when we look at how many servers were involved here, really it's 4 servers. Would you agree? That's it, really simple. So we start off with the compromised site, okay? Then we go to this site that ends in .176. Then several times we go to .49, and then we go to .151, which downloads Locky. And once again, these sites are most likely sites that are legitimate but have been compromised, okay? In other words, it's not the scheme where they're using a bulletproof hosting. So let's look at, when you look at the IOCs from the captured traffic, I just want to highlight the things in red. Failed DNS query, failed DNS query, failed DNS query. See all these failed DNS query? How can that help you understanding this? Set your filters looking for failed DNS queries, right? So in this case here, setting filters to capture any failed DNS queries could hopefully, or if you could block, and by the way, is it possible, do you think, to block all the URLs that may come with an exploit kit? Absolutely not. Now, if it was an IP address, it'd be easier, right? But they don't, just like we use domain names, right, to make things easier, right? Anybody know the site or the IP address of CNN or their favorite website? They don't know it. We do it by domain name. It's kind of the same thing for them too. So these understanding failed DNS queries will help you block this stuff. So in the next image, injected script is highlighted in a page from the compromised site. So let's look at this here. So this is what's injected. Notice that it's going to this URL story at opinionline.ro, and it's injecting this JavaScript here. Then it returns a script with an iframe that points to a rig exploit kit landing page. So what's an iframe? What does that do for you? An iframe, right? And it's a malicious iframe, obviously. What does it do? Or something else. Yeah, I mean, it's just another way that's more difficult to detect of downloading and installing something else on that website. In this case here, it points to this RigEK landing page. And the landing page really is what's significant because this is where the exploit comes from. And one thing you'll notice when you look at the decode on this for the landing page, it was mixed in with a large amount of nonsensical non-ASCII characters. Why do you think that was? Huh? It could be encoded, or it could aid in obfuscation, right? Then it's going to send a flash exploit because it determined, right, when it was at the landing page, okay, and it did its assessment of the system, that guess what? This is susceptible to an exploit that I have. So it's going to send this exploit to that system, okay? And this time it's encoded with an encryption algorithm. Why is it encoded? To prevent it being tagged, right, by a system on the network saying that it's malicious, okay? And then after rig sends the Locky downloader grabs Locky itself. So this is where it actually grabs the actual ransomware program, okay? And then now notice if we let's look at the close side. Pay attention to findidlist.com and Crocotan.com. So here you'll see that what are we seeing here in this traffic here? What is this? What's the nature of this traffic? What's standard query? What protocol uses queries? Standard queries, no less. It's DNS. Yeah, it's DNS. Okay. In fact, it's kind of you can't see it here, but it's a little clue there when you see the 53s, right? Isn't that the port for DNS? Okay. So what we're seeing is this is what's generating all those errors that we saw before. Okay. That essentially, for some reason, these domains were down, were taken down. I don't know. Maybe they didn't pay their bills for the DNS renewal. We don't know. But this is really of interest from trying to capture this traffic on the network. So once the host is infected, what's it going to do? It's going to infect this. It's going to infect this files. Definitely, the type of ransomware that you have determines, how it's going to operate. Right? Early ransomware found, files of importance that it felt like, JPEGs, docs, Excel. I think the most clever ransomware, and I can't remember the variant that did this, there was the one that encrypted the master boot record, right? Because, right, encrypting an entire hard drive takes a while, okay? Encrypting the master boot record. What's the size of the master boot record? Is it 512 bytes or something like that? I mean, it's really small. So think about that. If you don't have, and guess what? Fix MBR command isn't going to solve that problem. Yeah, it doesn't work, right? Because you're fixing something that's encrypted. I mean, it's really not going to work. So you could tell that it was infected because this version of Locky actually, when it encrypted files, renamed them with the Odin extension. Okay, right? Some ransomware will put crypt on the end, but this one was Odin, so it was Odin variation. So you could see, I hope you understand what the importance of DNS is in detecting this traffic, okay? If you can monitor DNS, you can actually get a view, because it's not atypical to see all these failed queries, okay, to get a clue that you've got essentially you've got an EK on the network, or you can actually prevent, okay, communication by looking at a lot of these. So how do you protect against these, okay? Just like any malware, it's really difficult to protect against. I mean, I'm not even going to say that you've got hope. I'll tell you, I mean, if this happens to your system, you've got a problem, okay? You're going to get infected, and really it's all about cleaning up at that point. It's been my experience that what you want to do, and I really enjoy the security-as-a-service solutions. Do you know those guys, like OpenDNS? You know those, where you point your MX record to this cloud provider and having them do a lot of filtering for you, and they can because they're bigger and they have more expertise than you. I've found that that's probably the most effective technique that I've seen to protect against this stuff. Keep it away from your network as much as possible, okay? So whether you're going to be exploited depends on the type of vulnerability being exploited, right? We've already agreed that every system is going to have vulnerabilities. You can reduce the number of vulnerabilities by making sure your system is patched, etc., but you're still going to find there's always going to be some kind of vulnerability. Definitely the version of the product that's being targeted, right? I have instances where certain clients have to run a certain version of Java because of a legacy application. Now, is that Java version vulnerable? Yes, it is, but they don't have a choice. It's either, it's a risk management decision. Either continue using that version, and I know it's because when a version gets updated by mistake, things stop working, okay? Essentially, you just got to hope for the best at that point. Definitely the attacker's ability to make use of the necessary exploitation techniques. Hopefully you get a good exploit kit that'll help you with that. And the amount of time required to build a reliable exploit, but typically this is why you pick a good EK, okay, like they did for Black Hole. So what are some of the current protections? Definitely endpoint protection, okay? Not my favorite. Like I said, if it worked to me, I'd focus on network solutions, but things like automated patch management, right? I mean, and by the way, this is not anything new that you're not going to hear if you're security professionals, right? You got to keep your systems patched. You've got to run antivirus, okay? Because antivirus is going to capture or go after the low-hanging fruit, okay? Now, one thing that we're seeing is the development of anti-exploit technology, okay? And we're moving from things that are signature-based, which is traditional antivirus, to signature-less, right? We're looking at behaviors. We're looking at what that system is doing, okay, that's out of the ordinary that may indicate a compromise. Definitely use the newest versions of applications if you can. Okay, why? Because they're more secure. Would you agree? Or at least the vulnerabilities have not been discovered yet. Okay, and if you can use script blocking software. Now I'm putting this here. I'll tell you now. Can you successfully block scripts on your web browser and expect to do anything useful? No. I think it's really interesting in the cybersecurity industry how we've done this. Because how all that fancy stuff, active content that you find on websites, that's for us, right? Well, if you've been to a static web page and then you go to a page with active content, this is what we want. Give me things moving, I want to see pictures, I want to see videos, that's it. But you know what? It's all that stuff that's made us more vulnerable. If you turn off scripts, does anybody, by the way, use NoScript? I know Tor users, right, have NoScript, their Tor browser users has it built in. Yeah, when I first started using it, you know what? I think I turned it off after 10 minutes. Nothing was working. It's just not, so if you can, go ahead, but I don't know. Definitely perimeter defenses are always going to be important. And when I was talking about perimeter, I'm going to include things like OpenDNS, the security as a service, where you can outsource this filtering. It doesn't necessarily have to be done at your firewall, at your perimeter. You can do it at another company before it can reach your local area network, okay? And this one, end user training. I'll tell you now, this is one where I know 100% of the companies that I work with fail. They absolutely fail. And why is that? Maybe because we don't like training our users. I don't know. I've seen instances of, it's funny, I see either too much training or absolutely no training. So much training where people don't even pay attention anymore. They got to do that mandatory training, and guess what? If you look at their computers while they're doing that mandatory online training, what do you think they're doing? Their budget. I'm looking at Twitter, seeing what the president said today. So yeah, we really fail at that. So what are some other conclusions? they've grown in popularity. Why is that? As I mentioned, they're automated. They require very little expertise. Okay, you don't have to be very technically skilled to get these things to work. Relatively inexpensive. Now, that's if it's an effective tool, it's going to be expensive. I'm just going to warn you. Okay, but think about it. Are you willing to pay $10,000 a month if you're bringing in $80,000 a month, tax-free? Okay. And there's a financial split that's very appealing to the distributor. Like I said, it's an affiliate model. Very flexible, okay? Notice that it can be customized for targeted attacks. Typically, these kinds of attacks are opportunistic, okay? They're not directed toward one particular individual organization. They're typically opportunistic, but you can customize it so you can have something like a watering hole attack. Have you heard of watering hole attacks? So that you can target one organization. I did some work with National Institutes of Health several years ago, and they were subject to a watering hole attack. Okay, they deliver lots of different types of malware. One thing about these EKs that I want you to remember, the word is that they are a framework. If you're familiar with frameworks, right? They don't actually dictate what you got to. You can plug, add and remove whatever you want, and that's one of the things that makes them effective. They're definitely good at avoiding detection, especially for traditional antivirus. You can either buy or rent them, okay? And the use of Bitcoin contributes to the anonymity, but those of us who use Bitcoin know it's not truly anonymous, right? If I get your Bitcoin address, I can go into the blockchain and figure out who you are eventually. And come with technical support, and there are just so many targets, okay? So we've seen, I mentioned earlier that we've actually seen a decrease in EK activity, and I'll tell you why that has been. 3 events in particular. Last year in June, the Lurk cybercrime gang members were arrested. Okay, that scared a lot of people because 50 people were going out to Russian prison. I've never been to Russian prison, but I think I saw a Discovery Channel on Russian prison. It doesn't look pretty. Well, that's how they're going to make money part-time in prison. Yeah. So in April 2016, Checkpoint did an in-depth analysis of the nuclear exploit kit, which essentially, they knew everything about it. So these guys went away. And then in September of last year, Cisco and GoDaddy did an operation against Neutrino, where essentially they took down a lot of Neutrino sites. So these events led to a decrease in activity, but also better defenses. I thought this was a neat figure. Qualys determined that in 2016, Adobe Flash vulnerabilities were patched 40% faster than in 2015. Okay, I think that's pretty cool. Okay, now you're probably still vulnerable, right? Because that's only 40% faster, but it's better than nothing, I guess. So result that authors, what we found, this is why you're going to still see EKs, they've downsized and have gone deeper underground. Okay, they may be contracting with people individually for development work, and they're doing smaller campaigns. Why? They don't want to be on the radar. They don't want to attract law enforcement attention. And now what we're finding is that now vulnerabilities are being delivered to Office macros. How long have Office macro vulnerabilities been around? Holy cow! It's like fashion. Those bell-bottom pants that you used to have in the 70s are coming back. Okay. So what are my predictions? I have here, unfortunately for the foreseeable future, insert your type of cybercrime here, because this can fall for anything, right? It will continue to succeed and thrive given the current technological and enforcement landscape. There is no incentive for that hacker in Russia, in Ukraine, in Romania to stop doing what they're doing. As long as they don't hack their own country, they're going to be very successful. And you'll notice that the hackers that have been caught from that area of the world are the ones that were in other countries, like Thailand. You guys know that, right? That's typically how we arrest them. We have to lure them out of the country. I don't think the ploys of meeting them online anymore and saying you're a sexy 18-year-old girl are going to work. That's been done. Guys have been arrested. But so now what they do is they follow them and they arrest them in countries with extradition treaties. So, like I said, internet's reach is global. But really the key thing is that there's still a lot of money to be made, okay? Still a lot of money. So we can continue to see EKs evolve and adapt. It's a technology that's not going to go away. And you know what? You will continue to be infected, you and your users. It's just going to continue to happen, okay? And it's going to continue to be difficult to police this, Like I said, you can arrest the author, but once that code has been released, it's out in the wild. It can be used. In fact, there were some instances of code actually being resold illegally, if that you can say that about cybercrime. They licensed it to use it themselves, but they were trying to resell it themselves illegally. All right. Any questions? I answered all the questions. Awesome. Thank you for coming. Take care.